The night before my doctorate defense, my husband pinned my arms back while his mother pressed cold scissors to my throat and whispered, "Women don't belong here." I walked in anyway, and when my father rose to speak, everyone in that room stopped breathing. The scissors touched my neck before I understood what was happening. I remember the cold of the blades first. A thin line of metal against skin that was still warm from the shower I'd taken an hour earlier, back when I still believed the worst thing that could happen that night was forgetting a citation. 8 years of research sat on my dining table 12 feet away. My dissertation, 340 pages, bound and tabbed. 2 flash drives backed up a third time on a cloud server I'd triple-checked that morning. Everything I had built since I was 24 years old. Then my husband, Hunter, said the sentence that ended our marriage before either of us admitted it out loud. "If you stand in front of those examiners tomorrow, forget you're still my wife." I want to tell you I saw it coming. I didn't. Not really. Not in the specific, brutal shape it took. But if you'd asked me to guess, 6 months earlier, whether Hunter Cabral would let his mother put scissors to my scalp the night before my doctoral defense, I think some small, exhausted part of me would have said maybe. That's the part of this story that still makes my hands shake more than the scissors do. 12 hours earlier, and also 2 years earlier, I'd been married to Hunter for 4 years when I finished my dissertation. I met him at 26, at a friend's engagement party, back when I was a second-year PhD student in developmental psychology at Windermere State, and he was a regional sales director for a logistics company called Meridian Freight Solutions. He was funny. He remembered small details about my research, the difference between resilience and mere coping, why I'd chosen to study children of high-conflict divorce instead of something less depressing, as he'd joked. For the first 2 years, he came to my conference presentations. He printed business cards that said "proud husband of a future doctor" as a joke gift for my 28th birthday. I tell people that part because I need them to understand I wasn't a fool, and I wasn't blind from the start. Something changed slowly, the way water changes rock, not a single flood, a drip. For the first 2 years, Hunter drove me to a 7 a.m. statistics seminar twice a week because my own car was in the shop, and he never once complained about the detour. He learned the names of my cohort, Priya, Devesh, the 2 Sarahs, and could tell you, unprompted, which one was struggling with their comprehensive exams. My mother liked him. My father, notably, did not. But my father had opinions about everyone I dated, and I'd learned to discount at least half of them. When Hunter proposed, 18 months in, at the same Overlook where we'd had our first real conversation, I said yes without a flicker of doubt. I remember thinking, distinctly, that I'd found one of the rare men who wanted a partner, and not a project to manage. The first drip was small. 18 months before the scissors, I got accepted to present at a national conference in Denver. A real one. Competitive. The kind that matters for a job market. Hunter said the timing was bad, that his mother's knee surgery meant he needed me home. I stayed. I told myself it was one conference. I told myself family comes first. The second drip. 6 months after that, my adjunct teaching contract at Windermere came up for renewal. 3 sections of intro psych, decent pay, real teaching experience for my CV. Hunter told me the drive was too much for someone finishing a dissertation, that he didn't like me getting home at 9 at night. I dropped to 2 sections, then 1. I told myself it was strategic. I told myself I was protecting my writing time. The third drip arrived with a name attached. Barbara. Barbara Cabral, Hunter's mother, started coming over for a few days, roughly a year before my defense. The few days became a pattern. 2 weeks a month, then 3. She told anyone who'd listen, including my own sister at Thanksgiving, that a wife's place was in the home raising children, not chasing a piece of paper from a university. I laughed it off the first time. I stopped laughing the 5th time, when she said it while looking directly at my laptop, at the folder labeled Dissertation Final V14, like she was speaking to the document itself. I want to be honest about something the internet doesn't always let people be honest about. I minimized every single one of these moments while they were happening. I told my best friend Priya that Hunter was just stressed. I told my advisor nothing at all. Each time I noticed something wrong, I built a small, tidy explanation and filed it away, because the alternative, that the man I married was becoming someone who wanted less of me, not more, was too expensive to consider 12 days before my defense. The loop that kept tightening. 4 months before the defense, Hunter forgot to forward an email from my department confirming my defense date, and I found out by accident, scrolling his email over his shoulder while he charged his phone. I told myself it was an oversight. My stomach told me otherwise. It took me 2 days to work up the nerve to ask him about it, and when I did, he laughed and called me paranoid. And somehow, by the end of the conversation, I was apologizing to him. 2 months before, Barbara accidentally unplugged my external hard drive while dusting, and I spent a frantic Saturday afternoon confirming my cloud backup hadn't corrupted along with the local files. It hadn't. I told myself it really was an accident. My hands did not agree. They shook for an hour after I confirmed the files were intact. 6 weeks before, Hunter told me, almost gently, that once I had the doctor thing out of the way, it would be a good time for me to take a break from academia altogether. Maybe substitute teach, maybe stay home if we decided to have kids. I remember standing very still in our kitchen, a dish towel in my hand, trying to figure out if he'd just told me my entire future was conditional on his approval. I told myself I'd misheard the tone. I hadn't. A month before, I told Hunter I'd been invited to submit my dissertation chapter to a journal, the kind of publication that mattered enormously for the assistant professor jobs I'd already started applying to. He congratulated me over dinner, dinner, and then, 3 days later, misplaced the folder of printed reviewer comments I'd left on the kitchen counter overnight, the only physical copy, because I hadn't yet scanned them. I spent a frantic morning reconstructing what I remembered of the feedback from memory before emailing the journal to ask for a resend, mortified, blaming a printer malfunction that didn't exist. I told myself it really had been misplaced. I never found the folder. 3 weeks before, I mentioned, carefully, that I'd need the car on defense day to get to campus early. Hunter said he'd already promised it to his mother for a doctor's appointment. I took an Uber that morning instead, a $22 ride I paid for out of an account Hunter didn't check, just to run a dry rehearsal of my presentation in an empty classroom. I didn't tell him. That was the first time I did something for myself and didn't report it to him afterward, and it felt like committing a small, necessary crime. Each loop, I noticed something wrong. Each loop, I explained it away. Each loop, the evidence mounted that my explanations were generous fictions. And each loop, I tried quietly to fix things instead of confronting them, smoothing Hunter's mood, avoiding Barbara's comments, protecting my work by simply protecting the peace. It never once occurred to me that the peace was the thing costing me the most. 2 days before Barbara arrived, for a few days, the Thursday before my Monday defense, uninvited, with a rolling suitcase and a casserole dish she referred to as a peace offering. For 2 days, she orbited the dining table where my materials were spread out, sighing loudly whenever I sat down to review my slides, telling Hunter within my earshot that some women need reminding what marriage means. I ignored her. I want to be clear that I tried the boring, sensible thing first. I ignored her, I kept working, I told myself 12 more hours and I'd be at campus and none of this would matter. That is the strategy every reasonable person recommends, and it is the strategy that failed me completely, because the people causing the problem were not interested in me simply enduring it. They wanted compliance, not silence. Sunday night, I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. I found them both waiting for me, like they'd rehearsed it. "You are not going to that defense," Barbara said. Flat, cold, final, like she was reading a verdict she'd already decided months ago. "Tomorrow I defend 8 years of research," I said. "That's what's happening." Hunter laughed, an ugly, sharp sound I'd never heard from him before, not even at his worst. "You've become unbearable, always studying, always thinking your work matters more than us." I tried to walk past him toward the hallway. He grabbed my arms. His grip crushed into my shoulders and pinned me against the counter's edge, hard enough that I'd find bruises the next day in the shape of 4 fingers on each arm. "Hunter, let me go," I said. My voice was shaking. I remember being embarrassed by that, even in the moment. Some absurd, misplaced instinct that I should sound calmer while a grown man twice my size held me against a countertop. He didn't let go. Barbara stepped behind me. I heard the drawer open before I understood what she was reaching for. Then I felt it. Cold steel. The flat side of kitchen scissors, laid flush against the side of my neck like a blade being measured for a cut that hadn't started yet. "Let's see if this helps you understand your place," she whispered. The first lock of hair hit the floor before I even screamed. Then the sound came out of me. I don't remember deciding to scream. It simply happened. A sound I didn't recognize as mine. Hunter held my shoulders still while his mother hacked at my hair, strand by strand, snip by snip, uneven and jagged, until my scalp burned in patches, and something in my chest felt like it was being cut along with it. "No committee is going to take you seriously looking like this," Barbara said, stepping back to admire the damage. "Tomorrow, you stay locked in this house." When they finally let go, I don't fully remember walking. I remember the bathroom door. I remember the lock clicking under my thumb like the only decision I'd been allowed to make all night. The mirror showed a stranger, jagged patches at the crown, one temple nearly bare, down to an uneven half-inch of scalp. My eyes were swollen from crying I didn't remember starting. I stood there for what felt like an hour and was probably 4 minutes, according to the timestamp on the first photo I took of myself, 11:52 p.m. A habit I didn't understand yet would matter enormously in 9 days. And then something in me stopped breaking and started hardening. 12:40 a.m. I packed my dissertation, my binder of note cards, one change of clothes, my laptop, both flash drives, and my charger into the same tote bag I used for conferences. I did not pack anything of Hunter's. I did not write a note. I called a rideshare from the bathroom, timestamped 12:47 a.m. on my phone, and walked out through the garage so I wouldn't have to pass the kitchen again. Barbara was shouting something behind me as the garage door rolled up. I didn't turn around. Hunter's texts started lighting up my phone before the car had even pulled out of the driveway. "Come home and we can fix this. Mom didn't want to go that far. You pushed us. If you walk in looking like that tomorrow, nobody will respect you." I didn't answer. The driver, a woman named Denise with a Honda Accord and a rosary hanging from her mirror, asked if I was okay twice. I told her the second time that I'd had a bad night. She didn't push. She drove me to the Blue Spruce Inn off Route 9, a motel I'd passed 1,000 times and never once considered staying in, and she waited in the parking lot with her hazards on until she saw the front desk clerk hand me a room key. I checked in at 1:14 a.m. for a room that cost $68 I put on a card Hunter had never asked to see the statements for. I asked the night clerk, a college kid named Marcus, if the front desk had scissors. He looked at my hair, didn't ask a single question, and handed me a small pair from behind the counter along with a bag of ice for my shoulders, unprompted, like he'd seen this exact kind of night before and knew better than to make me explain it. I sat on the edge of a motel bed at nearly 2 2 in the morning and cut my own hair straight for the first time in my life, using a phone camera propped against a lamp as a mirror, trying to turn jagged violence into something that could pass at a distance for an intentional shortcut. It was not good work, it was honest work. I did not sleep. I reviewed my methodology section by lamplight until 5 a.m., partly because I needed to, and partly because reciting my own research back to myself in a calm, steady voice was the only thing keeping the shaking in my hands down to a manageable tremor instead of a full collapse. Somewhere around 3:30 a.m., I called my friend Priya, the one from my cohort who'd known Hunter since the engagement party, and she picked up on the first ring even though it was the middle of the night for her too. I didn't cry when I told her. I said it the way I'd say a methods section, flat and sequenced. This happened, then I left. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said the sentence that stayed with me longer than almost anything else from that night. Selena, I need you to hear me. This was not a fight. This was an assault, and you should report it. And I will drive 2 hours right now if you need me to sit next to you while you do. I told her I'd think about it. She texted me a list of 3 domestic violence hotline numbers anyway, unprompted, at 3:52 a.m., and told me to save them even if I never used them. I did save them. I didn't call any of them that night. I would use one of the resources on her list 9 days later, when I finally sat down with a counselor for the first time and said the word assault out loud to a professional instead of just to myself. By 4:15 a.m., the ice from the front desk had gone lukewarm against my shoulder, and the swelling on my temple where I'd apparently caught the edge of the counter had gone from sharp to dull. I took 4 more photographs before dawn, my shoulders in the bathroom light, time-stamped and dated. A habit I didn't fully understand yet was called documentation, only that some instinct told me not to let this become a story with no proof attached to it. Institutional involvement. At 6:30 a.m., I called my dissertation advisor, Dr. Rebecca Tran, a developmental psychologist who'd directed 11 doctoral students to completion in 14 years at Windermere and had exactly 0 patience for nonsense, mine or anyone else's. I told her I needed 10 minutes before the defense. She told me to come to her office instead of the auditorium. She gasped when she saw me. Selena, what did they do to you? They thought if they humiliated me enough, I wouldn't show up, I said. We can postpone, she said immediately. No committee will fault you for this. If I don't finish this today, they win, forever, I said. And I meant it in a way that surprised even me. Dr. Tran didn't argue again. She did something else instead. She picked up her office phone and called the university's Title IX coordinator and the campus police liaison on the record at 7:05 a.m. and asked that both be aware a student might be arriving to a professional evaluation directly following a domestic assault. She wrote the time in her own notebook. I didn't understand yet why that mattered. I would in about 9 days. She also did something smaller that I only appreciated later. She walked me to the campus health center herself before the defense and asked the receptionist gently but firmly to fit me in with a counselor sometime that week. No rush, whenever I was ready. I met with that counselor, a licensed clinical social worker named Grace Fenwick, 6 days later, and again the week after that. Grace never once told me what to do about my marriage. She asked questions instead. What did safety feel like in my body? What had I stopped letting myself want? What would I tell a client of my own who described the same night I'd just described to her? That last question undid me more than anything else that week. I would have told a client to leave and never look back. It took hearing my own advice reflected back at me by someone else's mouth to actually believe it applied to me too. A first-year student I barely knew, Yuki, was in the department hallway when I passed through at 8:40 a.m., scarfless, hair still visibly uneven under the blazer I'd worn to hide my shoulders. She didn't ask questions either. She just unwound the wine-colored scarf from her own neck and handed it to me without a word. I tied it over the worst of the damage in a bathroom mirror with hands that had finally, mercifully, stopped shaking quite so badly. At 8:55 a.m., the panel sat down. Dr. Dominic Reyna, a methodologist known across 3 departments for asking the single question that could unravel a defense in front of a room full of people. Dr. Samira Ose, whose reputation for rigor preceded her into every room she entered. Both of them merciless in the specific, respectful way that meant they'd take you seriously enough to actually try to break your argument. I walked to the podium and froze. My father, Carson Voss, was standing in the front row. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since he told me at my engagement dinner that marrying Hunter meant lowering my standards, a sentence I hadn't forgiven him for, not once, not for one single day of those 3 years. He rose slowly from his seat. Behind him, I watched half the department stand as well. Not out of pity, I understood later, but because Dr. Tran had made 2 phone calls before 8 in the morning, and word travels fast in a building full of people trained to notice things. I took a breath and began. My voice shook through the first 3 minutes. Then it stopped shaking, somewhere around the 4th minute, when Dr. Reyna asked me to defend my sampling methodology, and I realized I knew the answer better than I knew almost anything else in my life. I defended 8 years of work for 90 minutes. Every answer felt like a door slamming shut on a version of the night before that wanted me small and silent. When it ended, the panel excused themselves to deliberate. I stepped into the hallway with hands like ice, and my father walked up to me before I'd finished exhaling. What my father found. Hunter called me last night, Carson said. said, "Told me you'd lost your mind, told me not to come today." My heart slammed against my ribs. "And you believed him?" "No," my father said. The call sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in a mirror. He paused. "So I drove to your apartment at 11. The doorman told me he'd seen you leave crying at midnight with a backpack. I found the blue spruce 20 minutes later. The front desk kid told me you'd borrowed scissors at 3 in the morning." I couldn't speak. His jaw tightened in a way I recognized from childhood, the exact expression he'd worn the one time a contractor tried to shortchange him on a job right before he did something about it. "I didn't need anyone to explain the rest," he said. "And Selena, after I hung up with Hunter, I made a few more calls. I found out something he doesn't even know I know." He glanced toward the closed door of the deliberation room, then back at me. "6 years ago, before you, Hunter was engaged to a woman named Vanessa Kirkland. She was 2 years into a master's program in accounting. I tracked down a mutual contact of his from college, man named Devin, who still keeps in touch with Vanessa's brother. Vanessa dropped out 11 weeks before her thesis defense. Nobody ever knew exactly why. Devin didn't either, not really, just that it happened fast, and that Barbara had been staying with them right before it did." The hallway went very quiet in my ears. "I called Vanessa this morning," my father said. "She picked up on the second ring, like she'd been waiting 6 years for someone to ask." Vanessa Kirkland, it turned out, had never fully recovered financially or professionally from leaving that program. She'd built a life anyway. She worked as a bookkeeper in Ohio now, married to someone else, a kid on the way. But she remembered with total clarity a night 3 weeks before her own defense, when Barbara had helped her get ready for a family dinner by cutting bangs Vanessa never asked for, to make her look more presentable, and a fight with Hunter afterward that left bruises on her forearm she'd photographed and never done anything with, because she was 24 and ashamed and had no idea back then that a pattern was forming that would repeat with someone else's life 6 years later. She still had the photos, time-stamped, untouched, sitting in an old phone in a drawer, because some part of her had known, even at 24, that she might need proof one day. The verdict and the other one. The committee reconvened at 11:20 a.m. Dr. Reyna spoke first. "Dr. Voss, my maiden name, the one on my diploma, the one I'd use for the rest of my career, your defense was one of the most rigorous I've overseen this decade. Congratulations. Pass with no revisions required." I don't remember the applause. I remember my father's face, and Dr. Tran gripping my shoulder hard enough that it should have hurt, and didn't, because everything that could hurt me that day had already happened 12 hours earlier. The second verdict took longer, and it wasn't handed down in an auditorium. I filed a police report that same afternoon with Detective Lauren Ashby, 14 years with the department, the last 6 in the domestic violence unit. She sat with me in a small interview room with a box of tissues she never once pushed toward me, letting me decide for myself when I needed one. She asked me to walk through the timeline twice, once loosely, once again slowly, with exact times where I had them, because, she explained, precise timestamps hold up better than a story told only in feelings. I gave her Denise's rideshare confirmation with its 12:47 a.m. pickup time, the Blue Spruce Inn's check-in record at 1:14 a.m., and the 4 photographs I'd taken before dawn. She photographed my shoulders herself as well, still marked with fingertip bruising by then turning a deep, ugly purple, and my scalp, and logged everything under chain of custody as Exhibit A and Exhibit B, initialing each evidence bag in front of me so I could see exactly how the process worked. A forensic nurse examiner at St. Aldrich's Medical Center, Dr. Priya Nandi, conducted a full exam and documented everything in a report that would later sit, formally labeled Exhibit C, alongside Vanessa Kirkland's 6-year-old photographs, Exhibit D, once Vanessa flew in 8 days later to give a statement establishing what prosecutors called, plainly, in front of a judge, a demonstrated pattern of coercive control. Melissa Ortiz, Esquires, a family law attorney, Dr. Tran connected me with the same week, filed for an emergency protective order within 72 hours, granted the following Monday, and began divorce proceedings the week after that. Barbara was charged with assault. Hunter, with assault and unlawful restraint, the pattern evidence from Vanessa's case cited directly in the prosecutor's filing as an aggravating factor. Barbara took a plea deal, 6 months later, to a reduced charge of misdemeanor battery, with a suspended sentence and 18 months of probation, on the condition of a no-contact order that covered me, and at Melissa's insistence, Vanessa as well. Hunter did not take a deal. He hired a defense attorney who tried in pretrial motions to have Vanessa's testimony excluded as irrelevant character evidence from a relationship with no legal bearing on the charges at hand. The judge disagreed, ruling that the 6-year gap and near identical circumstances, a fiancé or wife nearing a major academic milestone, Barbara present in the home in the preceding days, an unwanted haircut used as an act of control, established exactly the kind of pattern that made the evidence admissible. The trial itself took 4 days. I testified for 90 minutes, the same length as my defense, though it required a different kind of stamina. Vanessa flew in and testified for 40. Detective Ashby walked the jury through the photographic evidence and the chain of custody log, exhibit by exhibit, in the flat, procedural voice of someone who had done this 100 times before and still meant every word of it. The jury needed under 3 hours to convict Hunter on both counts. He was sentenced to 14 months, with the pattern evidence from Vanessa's case cited directly in the judge's remarks as an aggravating factor at sentencing. Meridian Freight Solutions placed Hunter on leave within 9 days of the arrest hitting the local court docket. docket and terminated him 3 weeks after that. Once a local reporter, Dana Cho at Channel 8, ran a short segment on a pattern of abuse alleged against a Windermere area executive, built entirely from public court filings and 2 willing on-record interviews, mine and Vanessa's. Dana never asked either of us a single question we hadn't already agreed to answer, and she let us both review our quotes before the segment aired, which is more than I expected from anyone by that point in the year. 9 months later, I go by Dr. Voss now on my letterhead, my email signature, and the nameplate outside a small office at a community mental health clinic where I split my time between clinical work and a part-time lecturer position, the kind of teaching load I choose, this time on my own terms. My hair grew out uneven for a while, and then it didn't, and somewhere in the growing out, I stopped flinching every time I passed a mirror. My father and I talk every Sunday now. He never brought up the engagement dinner again, and neither did I. Some apologies don't need to be spoken. They just need to be lived differently going forward, and his has been. Vanessa and I still text sometimes. Nothing profound. Pictures of her new baby, a joke about bookkeeping software, the ordinary texture of 2 lives that happened to intersect over the worst night either of us had ever had. I think about her a lot, actually. 6 years before Barbara touched scissors to my neck, she'd already rehearsed the exact same cruelty on someone else, confident enough in getting away with it, once that she never imagined a bookkeeper in Ohio would still have the receipts. I still see Grace, the counselor, once a month now, instead of once a week. Somewhere in one of those sessions, close to the anniversary of the trial, she asked me what I would tell the version of myself sitting in that motel room at 2 a.m., cutting her own hair by lamplight. I told her I'd say the thing I couldn't have believed yet, that the people who tell you no one will take you seriously are almost always the ones most afraid of what happens when someone finally does. I keep a photograph from that week in my desk drawer at the clinic now, not one of the injury photos, but the one Yuki's scarf is in, taken outside the auditorium 90 minutes before the defense. I don't look at it often. I like knowing it's there. They told me no committee would take me seriously looking like that. 2 committees did anyway, the one in the auditorium and the one that mattered more. 12 people in a jury box 11 months later who looked at 2 women's photographs, 6 years apart, and understood exactly what they were looking at. If you made it this far, I hope you never have to borrow scissors from a stranger at 3 in the morning, but if you do, I hope there's a Marcus behind the counter, an ice pack ready before you even asked, and someone waiting outside with their hazards on until they see you're safely inside.